Good afternoon. Can you please state your name and qualification for the camera, please?
Sure, my name is Dr. Ronald Saff, and I'm a board-certified internist and allergist, and I've been in Tallahassee for 24 years, and I've been a physician since 1987.
Today I have a few questions regarding prescriptions and how they are written. Do you mind telling me how you currently write your prescriptions? Are they electronic? Do you handwrite them?
I handwrite my prescriptions.
Okay, and have you ever had that you realized after a prescription that was written with some inaccuracy?
I think, in honesty, due to the large number of prescriptions that are written every day and multiplied by the numerous days in practice, I don't think there's a physician out there that probably hasn't made a slip, including myself, to be totally honest. None of my patients have ever been harmed, and the good thing about the system is that if something doesn't look right or feel right, the pharmacist picks up the phone and calls. So I don't think any of my patients have ever been harmed, but I can tell you some pretty tragic stories. I remember when I was in residency reading one of my medical journals, and it was all about this physician in Texas. I remember this very vividly because it's a pretty graphic case.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was he just had lousy handwriting, and he wrote for a blood pressure medication for his patient. And when you looked carefully, because the medical journal had actually photoed his prescription so you could see his sloppy handwriting, and it looked just like Quinaglute. Now, Quinaglute is an antiarrhythmic medicine. So the patient had received Quinaglute, which is an antiarrhythmic, from the pharmacy instead of a blood pressure pill. And tragically, the patient died, and the doctor was sued. So sadly, unfortunately, prescription errors is very common. In fact, I go to the gym and I happen to bump up with an attorney that I know. And this attorney specializes in defending pharmacies for mistakes. So mistakes happen along all the pathways that you can imagine, from prescription errors with doctors mistakenly writing out the wrong prescription. Sometimes the medicine is correct, but the name is incorrect. Sometimes it's vice versa. But there's all kinds of problems that can arise anywhere down the pathway. So for instance, a patient can drop off the handwritten prescription from the doctor, and a lot of the pharmacy techs who work there in the pharmacy are not super educated, are not super sophisticated, and they can make mistakes in getting the medications out of the pill bottles and putting it into the patient's pill bottles. So any and every mistake that you can imagine has happened. And in fact, my son was prescribed a medication by his doctor, and my wife went to the pharmacy and it was the wrong medicine. So it happens all the time. It turns out that his doctor took another patient's prescription and gave it to my wife. So it's very common. Fortunately, nothing has ever happened to me or any of my patients, but it's huge. It's huge, and I think it's very important that patients hear and write down the name of the medication that the doctor prescribes, writes it down on a piece of paper or puts it into their cell phone, and when you go to the pharmacy, make sure that what you receive from the pharmacy matches up with what you've written down.
So you talked about how it is a common occurrence for prescriptions to be written with some inaccuracy. Do you think there's any safe alternative?
Well, it's interesting. One would think that there's all sorts of inaccuracies in the paper system, and in fact there is, from misspelling to sometimes the patient's name isn't written down, or sometimes the doctor writes down the wrong medication, or a lot of the names of the drugs sound the same and are spelled similarly, so the pharmacist can make an error or the tech can make an error. And so one would think, well, okay, we'll just get rid of handwritten prescriptions and you've solved the problem by doing everything electronic. But that hasn't solved the problem, and I think some people would argue that it's made the problem worse. I remember reading about a study about the average emergency room doctor does about 20,000 clicks during one shift while working in the emergency room. So an 8-hour day, like 20,000 clicks. And some of those clicks are for medications. And so what happens is if the doctor clicks the wrong medicine in the drop-down box or the wrong dosage, then the patient still gets the wrong medication. So the wrong medication prescription is sent to the pharmacist. But even then, I'm told by this attorney that sometimes with some of the older systems, even if it's sent electronically, it comes out different on the receiving end of the pharmacy. So there's all kinds of mistakes, and it's pretty scary out there, the number of mistakes. So it's always, with everything in this country, it's buyer beware, or patient beware. You really got to check, and you got to know what the doctor prescribed, and you got to ensure that you're getting the right one. Sometimes everything looks good. Let's say you're prescribed digoxin, and then you get the bottle, and it says your name correctly, your date of birth correctly. It gives the name of the medication, digoxin. But what's in there is not digoxin. It's something else. So again, any type of mistake can and has been made.
That's interesting. I didn't know any of that. Thank you for your time. It was great hearing from you.
And probably another good fail-safe system is eat healthy, exercise regularly, and stay as healthy as you can so that you don't get sick, and so you don't get prescriptions, and you don't set yourself up for a doctor mistake or a pharmacist mistake.
That's good to hear. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.